Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are starting now chapter 40 of Al-Itqan. And chapter 40 and 41 are both summarized from an important book, which, if Muhammad could kindly fetch, just so I can show you, called Mughni al-Labib an Kutub al-A'arib. So this book obviously sheds light on, numerous subjects related to Quranic grammar, Arabic grammar. This is the edition that is edited by Muhyiddin Abdul Hamid. So, it's among the best editions, but at the same time, it doesn't have a great deal in terms of, footnotes and khidmah and so on. And I remember that the editor had said that he had intended on releasing something very extensive. There are shuruh on this book, but he wanted to really get the text out first before undertaking that. So what you get from the title here, it's a really charming title. It's one of my favorite book titles of all time. The Labib is supposed to be you, or maybe me as well. And the Mughni is this book which is going to save you from what? The Kutub al-A'arib. So sometimes people are, obviously we have numerous books of I'rab al-Qur'an. You have classical ones like of Az-Zajjaj and Nahas and so on. And then you've got modern works, which are all nice to look into and to read. And then you get some that are like Tafsil fi I'rab al-Tanzil and Al-Mufassal. And so there is this tendency to want to give more and more detail in I'rab. And then you have this book which is kind of saying, look, learn how it works, learn the source code, and then you will be labib, which is a good thing, right? You will be min ulil albab, and you will be able to figure out what's going on in the Arab of something by looking at it. And that's more chapter 41, where Arab is looked at. But a large part of this book actually is on the Adawat, which is what's covered in chapter 40. And I'm not going to give much by way of introduction to this. We'll just plunge in, and you're going to see how, he goes through alphabetically through what are generally huruf al-ma'ani, and sometimes things which are like huruf, prepositions of various kinds and all sorts of huruf that have some grammatical effect. And with the grammatical effect, obviously, is the impact on meaning. And that is where we are concerned, especially from the perspective of studying tafsir. So if you learn about the different uses of the hamza, if you learn about the different uses of the ahad is not so important, but let's say of the ba, okay, but let's say I was going to get to the ba in the next letter, right? Then your mind will be better able to parse a certain ayah and see, okay, this ba, what is its status and its effect? What is its meaning? What does it tell me, therefore, for tafsir and translation? What are the possibilities? That's really what's being laid out in this chapter. Under each letter, or under each harf or similar, each adat, each instrument, as I've called it here, what is the range of uses that it has, and what has been said by the grammarians about that. As before, I'm going to make these into footnotes for you, so it's a bit easier to look at them as we go through. These are things that I've noted as I've gone through. Now you're seeing the extent of this chapter if it's got this many footnotes and all the things that are being talked about. So I say change to footnotes. Is it conversion or is it reversion to footnote? That's the debate that we always have, right? If we say that they were born as footnotes, then only it was the parents that made it into endnotes. So it's come back to its original fitra of the footnote. Okay, so now I'm lost in this chapter. I'm just going to scroll back here. Sorry about all the scrolling. But as we can see, he's got himself, Imam Suyuti rahimahullah, has a small introduction before he gets into the content. Wow. If you are prone to epileptic fits, then please look away now while I do the strobe lighting. Oh, sorry. Because when I converted it to footnotes, it just took me to the end. Right. So as I've said in the beginning, there's clear reliance upon Mughni al-Labib, but also, via Zarkashi's Burhan. Yes. So Haider has discussed this in his book. And now we can listen in. This first recording takes us up to the word Hasha, which we are unlikely to reach today.
النوع الأربعون في معرفة معاني الأدوات التي يحتاج إليها المفسر، وأعني بالأدوات الحروف وما شاكلها من الأسماء والأفعال والظروف. اعلم أن معرفة ذلك من المهمات المطلوبة لاختلاف مواقعها، ولهذا يختلف الكلام والاستنباط بحسبها، كما في قوله تعالى: وإنا أو إياكم لعلى هدى أو في ضلال مبين. فاستعملت على في جانب الحق، وفي جانب الضلال، لأن صاحب الحق كأنه مستعل يصرف نظره كيف شاء، وصاحب الباطل كأنه منغمس في ظلام منخفض لا يدري أين يتوجه.
So it's a latifa. In a particular ayah, one harf has been used with respect to the believers, one harf has been used with respect to the unbelievers, and each has its own dalala, has its meaning and what it implies, and the contrast of them implies something as well, right? So ala hudan, or in the Surah Yusuf, ala basira, to be upon, to be firmly footed, to be, you're in a vantage point that you can see where you're going and what's going on. Fi dalal, to be, immersed in it, submerged in it. This is a subtlety.
وقوله تعالى: فابعثوا أحدكم بورقكم هذه إلى المدينة فلينظر أيها أزكى طعاما فليأتكم برزق منه وليتلطف.
So you see here, obviously when translating this chapter, there were many challenges. But what I've tried to do is understand the point that he's focusing on, and make the translation point to that and make it clearer. So here, when transcribing this, I've written only the things with the fa, because that's what he's going to comment on. The fa, and then the wa.
عطف على الجملة الأولى بالفاء والأخيرة بالواو لما انقطع نظام الترتب، لأن التلطف غير مرتب على الإتيان بالطعام، كما كان الإتيان به مترتبا على النظر فيه، والنظر فيه مترتبا على التوجه في طلبه، والتوجه في طلبه مترتبا على قطع الجدال في المسألة عن مدة اللبث وتسليم العلم له تعالى.
Okay, so tarattub, there is some copies that say tartib. So although they're related meanings, tarattub here is not about sequence and order, but one thing being mutarattib on another is somehow to do with dependency, right?
وقوله تعالى: إنما الصدقات للفقراء، عدل عن اللام إلى في الأربعة الأخيرة، إذانا إلى أنهم أكثر استحقاقا للمتصدق عليهم بمن سبق ذكره باللام، لأن في للوعاء، فنبه باستعمالهما على أنهم أحقاء بأن يجعلوا مظنة لوضع الصدقات فيهم، كما يوضع الشيء في وعائه مستقرا فيه. وقال الفارسي إنما قال وفي الرقاب ولم يقل وللرقاب ليدل على أن العبد لا يملك.
So there can be different العبد لا يملك بل العبد يملك يعني في الفقه والقانون. So the thing is that there can be different explanations, but the use of different huruf and the variation between them and the contrast between them is all a door for tadabbur.
ابن عباس قال الحمد لله الذي قال عن صلاتهم ساهون ولم يقل في صلاتهم ساهون، وسيأتي ذكر كثير من أشباه ذلك.
So it's a famous example, and as I've said in the footnote here, فويل للمصلين الذين هم في صلاتهم ساهون. That you have sometimes sahu in your prayer, and then you have the sajdah to sahu. There's not wail on you, it's just, you're a sahi in your prayer. So it's referring to something else, to neglect the prayer and not perform it in its time.
وهذا سردها مرتبة على حروف المعجم، وقد أفرد هذا النوع بالتصنيف خلائق من المتقدمين كالهروي في الأزهية، والمتأخرين كابن أم قاسم في الجنى الداني.
Okay, so he mentions these. I'm not sure why Ibn Hisham is not mentioned here. See further reference in Abdul Khaliq Udayma's work, Dirasat li Uslub al-Qur'an, which is a magnificent work. We don't have time to go on and on about it as I'd like to, but this is a massive 11-volume modern achievement by an Azhari scholar, which builds on the type of content that we're going to be studying here. The author points out that Ibn Qasim's work was incorporated completely by Ibn Hisham. So Ibn Hisham's book, Mughni al-Labib, is much more detailed and intricate than what we are going to study. So al-Suyuti and those that he was taking from have done a service by making it simpler for us, taking out a lot of the examples and exceptions. There are still exceptions there, but it's clearer what is kind of the main rule and then what is the exception. In Ibn Hisham's work, what I find, and I could be wrong in my judgment here, but what I find sometimes is that you're sort of expected to get the main point, and then the focus is on the exceptions. The focus is on the things that don't fit that rule. So in that way, it's quite an advanced work and difficult to parse. Whereas I think this chapter is far more accessible, and especially will be through the translation. And by translating it, the other thing that I'm trying to provide is a manual for translation, because now you're going to see the Hamza is used for these meanings. In an Arabic book like Al-Itqan, that's helping you to understand Arabic on its own terms. In a translation of it, as long as the translation is sound and decent, you will now see what are the different ways that the Hamza can be translated in these different contexts. And in order to do that, we have the example of the ayahs, right? So the specific ayah in which, the example of where it occurs, we see how is the Hamza being translated in the ayah. Now, especially maybe due to the time in which I originally did this, I was using the translation of Abdullah Yusuf Ali as my basis. And Yusuf Ali's translation still remains among the finest that are out there, with all its issues, like really all the translations. But because I was trying to translate or provide a translation of the Quran that's sensitive to the individual usage, I sometimes and very often had to adjust Yusuf Ali's translation for the purpose. So what you're seeing mostly is Yusuf Ali's translation made to conform by me to the meaning and the nuance and the subtlety that is being pointed to in the meaning of each harf or adat. So let's start with the Hamza.
الهمزة تأتي على وجهين، أحدهما الاستفهام، وحقيقته طلب الإلهام، ومن ثم اختصت بأمور. أحدها
obviously istilham حقيقته طلب الإلهام, but if you want ifham then you do istifham, right?
جواز حذفها كما سيأتي في النوع 56. ثانيها ترد لطلب التصور والتصديق بخلاف هل، فإنها للتصديق خاصة، وسائر الأدوات للتصور خاصة. ثالثها أنها تدخل على الإثبات، نحو أكان للناس عجبا، الذاكرين، الذكرين، وعلى النفي، نحو ألم نشرح. وتفيد حينئذ معنيين، أحدهما التذكر والتنبيه كالمثال المذكور، وكقوله تعالى ألم تر إلى ربك كيف مد الظل، والآخر التعجب من الأمر العظيم كقوله تعالى ألم تر إلى الذين خرجوا من ديارهم وهم ألوف حذر الموت. وفي كلا الحالين هي تحذير، نحو ألم نهلك الأولين. رابعها تقديمها على العاطف تنبيها على أصالتها في التصدير، نحو أو كلما عاهدوا عهدا، أو أمن أهل القرى، أثم إذا ما وقع. وسائر أخواتها يتأخر عنها، كما هو قياس جميع أجزاء الجملة المعطوفة.
So just be ready that this chapter is going to be very technical like this. The examples are going to be given. I would say, focus on those examples, focus on the ayat, look at the translation, see how it's been translated in order to understand the point that's being made. Here in the Hamza, he's describing what is the difference and what are the usages of Hamza to istifham versus hal. Right? So that would be useful to you when you want to see, okay, which one should I use? It's not going to be, the question itself is not necessarily that pertinent to interpreting the Qur'an, right? But as a sort of completion of your understanding of Hamza, he wants to say this is what it does in distinction to hal, right? Because both of them are used for questioning. So what type of questioning and what type of circumstances? The other thing you notice here is that this discussion overlaps with discussions that we have in Ilm al-Balagha, specifically Ilm al-Ma'ani, right? And that occurs a number of points in this chapter. You see that, for example, what type of questioning, right? So a question can be just a question, like innocently, I want to know. That's the basic, the haqiqah of questioning, as he said, talabul ifham. Is that I don't understand, so I do istifham in order that you tufhimuni wa ana afham, right? So that's the haqiqah of istifham. But beyond that, you have all sorts of what we call rhetorical questions, even in English. And when you look at these examples in the translation, we can understand them. Is it the two males he has prohibited? Did we not expand for you your breast? You can understand from this because in other languages like English, we do have rhetorical questions with different purposes, such as reminding someone of a favor, or it's not supposed to be ta'ajjub, it's supposed to be ta'jib. It's like calling on you to marvel at something. Have you not considered those who left their homes in many thousands fearing death? So you're supposed to call that to mind and be amazed at the mawqif that is described. Didn't we destroy the predecessors? Right? That implies a warning. So there are numerous balaghi usages of istifham in general and of the hamza in particular.
نحو فكيف تتقون فأين تذهبون فأنى تؤفكون فهل يهلك فأي الفريقين فما لكم في المنافقين.
So you see here what his point was. The a has to go before things like waw and fa and thumma, whereas otherwise these huruf go before the questioning word.
خامسها أنه لا يستفهم بها حتى يهجس في النفس إثبات ما يستفهم عنه، بخلاف هل، فإنه لما لا يترجح عنده فيه إثبات نفي ولا إثبات، حكاه أبو حيان عن بعضهم.
لما.
سادسها أنها تدخل على الشرط، نحو أفإن مت فهم الخالدون، أفإن مات أو قتل انقلبتم، غيرها، وتخرج عن الاستفهام الحقيقي فتأتي لمعان تذكر في النوع 57. فائدة: إذا دخلت على رأيت امتنع أن تكون من رؤية البصر أو القلب، وصار بمعنى أخبرني، وقد تبدل هاء، وخرج على ذلك قراءة قنبل ها أنتم أولئي بالقصر، وقد تقع في القسم، ومنه ما قرئ ولا نكتم شهادة.
So not ha antum, but ha antum. In that reading of Qunbul, it is sometimes explained. That's وَخُرِّجَ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. So some have done takhrij of that reading in the following way, that it is ha, the short ha is standing in for what would normally be the hamza of questioning.
بالتنوين الله بالمد. الثاني من وجهي الهمزة.
So بالمد means Allah, whereas بالقصر means without the ha antum, right? So these things are actually made so that you would read it correctly, but you know, it is what it is.
تكون حرفا ينادي به القريب وجعل.
Right, so this is the second usage of the hamza. The first was hamza for questioning, and then he discussed some details about that, which is a really good roundup of your nahu that you studied elsewhere, and now you've got it kind of summarized, what is specific to the interrogative hamza as opposed to others. By the way, you're also going to learn a lot of terms that you're going to see again and again: interrogative, elliptical, otios. And if you want to know what it means, say in the chat that you don't recognize that word, and I will tell you, inshallah. But there are certain terms that, you know, I use in translation of certain technical words in Arabic, and they come up again and again, right? Elliptical means that it's mahdoof. It means that it is muqaddar. It means that it is, you know, in other words, it's just something that is implicit or implied. So, vocative particle. This is for nida. So you can also figure it out for yourself by comparing the Arabic to the English, these translation terms, and that can be something helpful to you if you take note of them. Question: would you translate "Ara'ayta man ittakhadha" as "inform me"? That's what he's saying, yeah. But that doesn't mean you have to take that as like gospel, or you can take it as gospel, so you're not sure if it's true, right? So the original gospel. So you can take that as what is being stated here, recommended. Yes. The fa'ida is, if you see ara'ayta, it doesn't mean ru'yatul ayn, and it doesn't even mean ru'yatul qalb, which is like basira, but it's mean, have you considered? So akhbirni is a sort of rough way of saying that, right? So don't take it too specifically and literally. It's like, when I translated يا صاحبي السجن أأرباب متفرقون خير أم الله الواحد القهار in Surah Yusuf, there I looked at the nida involved, right? So this is not about Hamza, but the ya. It says Ya صاحبي السجن. I ended up translating as tell me, prison mates, right? Because I understand that he's asking them to tell him something, and this is the sort of situation in which one says أرأيتما, like, have you given it thought? Right? So the akhbirni is a rough way of saying that this is the kind of meaning that is intended, not saying literally have you seen or have you thought about, but it's more about, okay, so what is the result of, you know, give me your best considered opinion on the following, right? And say something thoughtful. Don't give me a basic bro answer. Okay.
جعل منه الفراء أمن هو قانت آناء الليل على قراءة تخفيف.
So not the reading of amman, but the reading of aman huwa qanitun. So some have said that is, oh, you who is standing at night.
أي صاحب هذه الصفات. قال ابن هشام: ويبعده أنه ليس في التنزيل نداء بغير ياء، ويقربه سلامته من دعوى المجاز.
So there is nida without any harf, of course. But is there any nida with a harf other than ya? That is what Ibn Hisham is denying.
لا يكون الاستفهام منه تعالى على حقيقته، ومن دعوى كثرة الحذف، إذ التقدير عند من جعلها للاستفهام: أمن هو قانت خير أم هذا الكافر، أي المخاطب بقوله: قل تمتع بكفرك قليلا، فحذف شيئان معادل الهمزة والخبر.
So this is, of course, a bit of back and forth on an opinion. If we were to focus in on that and read that very carefully, that would take us much more time. We're going to pass over these things, except that if you see a discussion that particularly interests you, feel free to ask me, and inshallah I will try to take more time on those.
أصل أحد. قال أبو حاتم في كتاب الزينة: هو اسم أكمل من الواحد. ألا ترى أنك إذا قلت فلان لا يقوم له واحد، جاز في المعنى أن يقوم اثنان فأكثر، بخلاف قولك لا يقوم له أحد.
So ahad is a slightly strange one to have as an adat. But anyway, it is here, and like we saw the difference between hamza and hal and other adawat al-istifham, here the contrast is ahad. What makes it specific? How is it used specifically as opposed to wahid?
في الأحد خصوصية ليست في الواحد. تقول ليس في الدار واحد، فيجوز أن يكون من الدواب والطير والوحش والإنس، فيعم الناس وغيرهم، بخلاف ليس في الدار أحد، فإنه مخصوص بالآدميين دون غيرهم. قال: ويأتي الأحد في كلام العرب بمعنى الأول وبمعنى الواحد، فيستعمل في الإثبات وفي النفي، نحو قل هو الله أحد، أي واحد، وأول فابعثوا أحدكم بوارقكم.
So, I mean, if you're following the translation, you're not going to be misled by his pauses. So the idea here is, and this is from Abu Hatim, that when you say قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, it means one and first. واحد وأول.
وبخلافهما فلا يستعمل إلا في النفي. تقول ما جاءني من أحد، ومنه أيحسب أن لن يقدر عليه أحد، وألم يره أحد، فما منكم من أحد، ولا تصل على أحد. وواحد يستعمل فيهما مطلقا، وأحد يستوي فيه المذكر والمؤنث. قال الله تعالى: لستن كأحد من النساء، بخلاف الواحد، فلا يقال كواحد من النساء، بل كواحدة. وأحد يصلح للإفراد والجمع. قلت: ولهذا وصف قوله تعالى: فما منكم من أحد عنه حاجزين، بخلاف الواحد. والأحد له جمع من لفظه، وهو الأحدون والآحاد، وليس للواحد جمع من لفظه، فلا يقال واحدون، بل اثنان وثلاثة. والأحد ممتنع الدخول في الضرب والعدد والقسمة، وفي شيء من الحساب، بخلاف الواحد. انتهى ملخصا، وقد تحصل من كلامه أن بينهما 7 فروق. وفي أسرار التنزيل للبارزي في سورة الإخلاص قال: فإن قيل المشهور في كلام العرب أن الأحد يستعمل بعد النفي والواحد بعد الإثبات، فكيف جاء أحد هنا بعد الإثبات؟ قلت: قد اختار أبو عبيد أنهما بمعنى واحد، فلا تختص أحدهما بمكان دون الآخر، وإن غلب استعمال أحد في النفي، ويجوز أن يكون العدول هنا عن الغالب، وحينئذ رعاية للفواصل.
Any question coming to your mind? Because there's a question coming to my mind. Is this really a reference to Surah Al-Ikhlas, verse 1? Because how is it after إثبات? وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Oh, verse 1, of course. Yes. شكرا.
انتهى. وقال الراغب في مفردات القرآن: أحد يستعمل على ضربين، أحدهما في النفي فقط والآخر في الإثبات، فالأول لاستغراق جنس الناطقين ويتناول الكثير والقليل، ولذلك صح أن يقال ما من أحد فاضلين، كقوله تعالى: فما منكم من أحد عنه حاجزين. والثاني على 3 أوجه: الوجه الأول المستعمل في العدد مع العشرات، نحو 11، 21. والثاني المستعمل مضافا إليه بمعنى الأول، نحو أما أحدكما فيسقي ربه خمرا. والثالث المستعمل وصفا مطلقا ويختص بوصف الله تعالى، نحو قل هو الله أحد، وأصله واحد إلا أن واحدا يستعمل في غيره. انتهى. فصل. إذ ترد على أوجه، أحدها.
You mentioned 11 and 21 تقريبا. I'm assuming your his edition didn't have that, right?
He mentioned some things which I haven't translated.
11 and then he said, I think 21 or something.
I see. Okay, so he says نحو 11 21. I guess this was not in the Abu Fadl edition. So I'll just put, maybe I'll double check that. Of course, our maybe more common usage nowadays is we say 21, right? But I have seen this in classical works. Was there anything else missed?
No. But when it says here وأصله واحدة إلا أن واحدا يستعمل في غيره. غيره, is it referring to
في غير الله تعالى?
Okay, so
yeah. Although in my translation it doesn't look like that.
That's why I was just double.
Okay. I think the point is المستعمل وصفا مطلقا يختص والثالث المستعمل في وصف مطلقا يختص بوصف الله تعالى، نحو قل هو الله أحد وأصله واحد إلا أن واحد يستعمل في غيره. I would think this means it's used for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
That's what I initially thought.
Okay, good. So this is a very young Sohaib with he will have these problems. We'll catch him.
أن تكون اسما للزمن الماضي وهو الغالب. ثم قال الجمهور: لا تكون إلا ظرفا، نحو فقد نصره الله إذ أخرجه الذين كفروا، أو مضافا إليها الظرف، نحو إذ هديتنا، يومئذ تحدث، وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون. وقال غيرهم: تكون مفعولا به، نحو واذكروا إذ كنتم قليلا. وكذا المذكورة في أوائل القصص كلها مفعول به بتقدير اذكر. وبدلا منه، نحو واذكر في الكتاب مريم إذ انتبذت، فإذ بدل اشتمال من مريم على حد البدل في يسألونك عن الشهر الحرام قتال فيه.
So this is it's a very frequently occurring thing in the Quran where you have idh, and then so this is telling you sort of the rule when you look at idh. Being a dharf, it means it applies to a particular time when something happened, right? So that time might be kind of, or sort of what happened at that time. The idh is the time, and then the what happened is the amil fihi, right? So either it is something that kind of occurs before. واذكر في الكتاب مريم واذكر إذ انتبذت. So that's a badal from Maryam. But here the واذكر is actually explicit. So that's the other possibility, that إذ is مفعول به, and they say منصوب بفعل مقدر تقديره أذكر. So the kind of general one that they say all the time is أذكر. And part of the rationale is that we have it مصرحا به in ayahs like this, واذكر. But then other places you just have وَإِذْ نَجَّيْنَاكُمْ and so on. So in those situations, أذكر is kind of again a kind of catch-all, general, على وجه التقريب. You could replace that with all sorts of things from the same kind of family. So like, be amazed at, be grateful for, many other things. But أذكر is just your sort of plain, basic nahwi taqdeer that you should not follow too slavishly, that literally the taqdeer has to be this one. Those are what you could call sort of like place filler taqdeers of the nahwiyin, right? So you understand that the general situation with إذ is that it is maf'ul of a fi'l like أذكر, or it is sometimes you find the amil in the text.
اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ جعل فيكم أنبياء، أي اذكروا النعمة التي هي الجعل المذكور، فهي بدل كل من كل، والجمهور يجعلونها في الأول ظرفا لمفعول محذوف، أي واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم قليلا، وفي الثاني ظرفا لمضاف إلى المفعول محذوف، أي واذكر قصة مريم، ويؤيد ذلك التصريح به في واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء. وذكر الزمخشري أنها تكون مبتدأ، وخرج عليه قراءة بعضهم لقد من الله على المؤمنين، قال التقدير منه إذ بعث، فإذ في محل رفع كإذا في قولك أخطب ما يكون الأمير إذا كان قائما، أي لمن من الله على المؤمنين وقت بعثه، انتهى. قال ابن هشام ولا نعلم بذلك قائلا. وذكر كثير أنها تخرج عن المضي إلى الاستقبال، نحو يومئذ تحدث أخبارها.
So I've said, translate this, we don't know anyone who stated this. It could be, we don't know anyone who holds this position, right? Because qawl often is majaz for holding a position or believing something, right? So لا نعلم بذلك قائلا, he may be saying we don't know anyone who actually maintains that, although there is obviously somebody who said it for it to have been منقول في الكتاب.
جمهور أنكروا ذلك وجعلوا الآية من باب ونفخ في الصور، أعني من تنزيل المستقبل الواجب الوقوع منزلة الماضي الواقع. واحتج المثبتون منهم ابن مالك بقوله تعالى فسوف يعلمون إذ الأغلال في أعناقهم، فإن يعلمون مستقبل لفظا ومعنى لدخول حرف التنفيس عليه، وقد عمل في إذ فيلزم أن تكون بمنزلة إذا. وذكر بعضهم أنها تأتي في الحال، نحو ولا تعملون من عمل إلا كنا عليكم شهودا إذ تفيضون فيه، أي حين تفيضون فيه. فائدة: أخرج ابن أبي حاتم من طريق السدي عن أبي مالك قال ما كان في القرآن إن بكسر الألف فلم يكن، وما كان إذ فقد كان.
So this would be another example of kulliyat al-Qur'an. Not necessarily kulliyat al-alfaz, as we saw previously in the Wujuh al-Nadha'ir chapter. But another kind of general rule, wherever you see in, then it's something that's not occurred, and when you see idh, it's something that occurred. There is some discussion in my thesis about some points of view around ayah, was it 13 and 14 of Surah Al-Mujadala, regarding Ayatul Najwa. So they are told to give some sadaqat if they want to come and get some direct and private conversation with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ayah 12. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا ناجيتم الرسول فقدموا بين يدي نجواكم صدقة ذلكم خير لكم وأطهر فإن لم تجدوا فإن الله غفور رحيم. And then the next ayah is, according to most of the scholars, nasikha of the preceding. So then there's a question of, what kind of period of time occurred between the two. أَأَشْفَقْتُمْ أَن تُقَدِّمُوا بَيْنَ يَدَيْ نَجْوَاكُمْ صَدَقَاتٍ فَإِذْ لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَتَابَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ. So there are some explanations from people who are anti-naskh, who are, skeptics of naskh altogether, because they cannot accept that there's a single occurrence of naskh in the Quran. So they have to find something else. Abu Muslim al-Asfahani has a point of view about this. You can find in Tafsir al-Razi. And then in modern times, people also advance some views. And one that I discussed there by Israr Ahmed Khan, I pointed out how his whole thing depended on not understanding the dalala of idh. Okay, so these are the kind of things where, you can have a dispute over a meaning, and then you can present a translation which is based on a certain misconception. I can probably pull that up for you if I can find. Don't want to pull up too many things in the thesis. I can maybe pull it up to show you how he translated it, and then we can see, okay, why does that not work? It doesn't work because of idh. See if I can find it like that. There we go. Right. So an alternative to naskh was proposed. Obviously, the mas'ala itself, you might need to read a bit more around it to see what's going on and why people are saying what they say. But he says that these ayahs form one single context dealing with one subject matter. It's unreasonable to suppose that these two verses were separated by any period of time. And then he says, some reasons why the naskh should not be assumed. But then he says, if you do not have the means, God is most forgiving and merciful. That is in ayah 12, as we read it. A fundamental problem with Khan's interpretation is demonstrated by his translation of a key phrase from the following verse, the Nasikha verse. He says, if you do not do so, and Allah forgives you. فَإِذْ لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَتَابَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ. So he translated, if you do not do so, which he takes to be a continuation of the dispensation provided in the preceding verse. However, since the particle idh is used for the past tense and to explain cause, that is to say, since you did not, this confirms the past tense for the preceding phrase also. Khan renders, is it that you are afraid of spending sums in charity? Ashfaqtum is that you were. Based on his view, this addresses the poor believers, etc., etc., right? And in the footnote, I'm sure. I said, the same is found with a number of prominent Quran translators, because they are perhaps not sensitive to the meaning of idh, because they're not sensitive to the issues that would arise by translating it this way. They're not sensitive of the debates over the naskh and the reasoning behind things, but they're just like, just get this translation out so that I can say, I'm a translator of the Quran. So as I said here, see Suyuti Al-Itqan, this page that we are looking at, 1012, right? There you are, this page here, to explain the meaning of idh. So when translating, we need to be able to go back to these sources in order to say, okay, I understand idh in the following way. Then we will ask you, and where did you get that idh means that? So we need to be able to go back to something that we can agree on as the basis for our debates over these things, right? So can فَإِذْ لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَتَابَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ, can it mean if you do not do so? فَإِذْ لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا, it cannot mean that. Or if it can, هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ, right? So what I'm saying is, look, I know this is very like technical and intricate and stuff, but it's real life issues. Okay, is it, we're talking about the naskh of an ayah and the of something that happened at that time about the munajat of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So maybe it's not a hot live issue like the ones you're debating online, but what I'm saying is there are real translation issues that arise from understanding the huruf al-ma'ani correctly.
الوجه الثاني أن تكون للتعليل، نحو ولن ينفعكم اليوم إذ ظلمتم أنكم في العذاب مشتركون، أي ولن ينفعكم اليوم اشتراككم في العذاب لأجل ظلمكم في الدنيا. وهل هي حرف بمنزلة لام العلة أو ظرف بمعنى وقت؟ والتعليل مستفاد من قوة الكلام لا من اللفظ. قولان المنسوب إلى سيبويه الأول، وعلى الثاني في الآية إشكال، لأن إذ لا تبدل من اليوم لاختلاف الزمانين، ولا تكون ظرفا لينفع لأنه لا يعمل في ظرفين، ولا لمشتركون لأن معمول خبر إن وأخواتها لا يتقدم عليها، ولأن معمول الصلة لا يتقدم على الموصول، ولأن اشتراكهم في الآخرة لا في ظلمهم. ومما حمل على التعليل وإذ لم يهتدوا به فسيقولون هذا إفك قديم، وإذ اعتزلتموهم وما يعبدون إلا الله فأووا إلى الكهف. وأنكر
So you see how I translated here the idh for ta'leel, I've used the word since, that is to say because you have kept apart from them and what they worship except God, you should take refuge in the cave. So as he says, مما حمل على التعليل, that is to say some have interpreted that way. It doesn't mean that that is the only or the correct interpretation.
Can you explain the footnote after حين تفيضون فيه?
Let's go back to here. This footnote here.
Yeah.
Let's see. I will try. Remember what? Okay. Some stated that it may come to express a hal, circumstance. Would you question my translation of hal here? Because I'm questioning it now. That's before we get to the second usage. Just before the faida. Right. وذكر بعضهم أنها تأتي للحال. No, I think hal does mean circumstances. So hal could also, like a translator can trip up here if they think that hal means circumstance, whereas it might mean the present time, which is a slightly different thing. But I think he is saying that some said تأتي للحال نحو ولا تعملون من عمل إلا كنا عليكم شهودا حال إفاضتكم فيه, right? أي حين تفيضون فيه, which would be حال. Now in the footnote I've said, it appears there was some confusion in the author's paraphrasing of the Burhan, as the meaning of حين is not the same as the grammatical حال. I don't know what my complaint is here, to be honest. And I'm reading it now.
Did they mention there's a footnote there?
There's a footnote.
I think that might be where you got it from.
هذا النقل غير محرر. لأن الزركشي في البرهان ذكر لها معنيين مفعولا به ومعنى حين نحو إذ تفيضون فيه أي حين تفيضون فيه، وعبارة السيوطي جمعت المعنيين في معنى واحد، ولفظة الحال استمدها من تقدير المانعين للمفعولية لأن الأصل واذكروا حالكم. I don't know if this complaint is really a big deal.
So what is he trying to...
I mean, we'd have to ponder on that maybe in another time so that we don't lose. Yeah.
جمهور هذا القسم وقالوا التقدير بعد إذ ظلمتم. وقال ابن جني راجعت أبا علي مرارا في قوله تعالى لن ينفعكم اليوم الآية مستشكلا إبدال إذ من اليوم، وآخر ما تحصن منه أن الدنيا والآخرة متصلتان وأنهما في حكم الله سواء فكأن اليوم ماضي. انتهى. الوجه الثالث التوكيد.
So, I mean, there's a whole discussion there which we only passed over quickly. But something very nice is that, you know, sometimes you just have to understand things in the language of the Quran, what is actually talking about. And then you remember this is min umur al-akhirah, and therefore our very strict conventions about what should make sense may actually break down. And that might be the very point, like the very fact that so much of what is talked about regarding the hereafter is talked about with the past tense as if it already happened. The wisdom of that, and Allah knows best, is to actually break down our expectations about reality, about when things occur, that things happen in a very specific order, that there is a lot of time until the Day of Judgment, when it is spoken here in terms that it has already happened. And maybe on some level of reality it has already happened, and yet we are still experiencing, if you think about it this way, if we get the most powerful telescopes that we have and we look at galaxies, like how many light years away? Billions of light years away, right? And then we are seeing, for example, that this galaxy is exploding, right? In actual fact, it exploded a very, very long time ago, billions of years ago. We're only seeing it now. So our conception of what is now, what is future, what is past, is very limited. And sometimes maybe the language of the Quran is reflecting that, or drawing our attention to it if we want to pay attention to almost this kind of spiritual readings of the grammar, which in a way that's the kind of thing that you're seeing here. So it's nice when the Nahwis get out of their very dry mode, which is most of the time.
التوكيد بأن تحمل على الزيادة قاله أبو عبيدة وتبعه ابن قتيبة وحمل عليه آيات منها وإذ قال ربك للملائكة.
So as I mentioned to you, otios, it's a word that I use a lot. It's the word for ziyada. There will be discussion about the concept of ziyada later in the Arab chapter. But just to give you an idea about this, if something is za'ida, it means grammatically serves no purpose, right? It can serve another purpose. It can give you a sense of emphasis. So something that says za'ida lit-ta'kid. So that means it serves a purpose. It's not redundant and useless. It just means that it doesn't have a grammatical function, right? So that's what they mean by ziyada.
الوجه الرابع التحقيق كقد، وحملت عليه الآية المذكورة، وجعل منه السهيلي قوله بعد إذ أنتم مسلمون. قال ابن هشام وليس القولان بشيء. مسألة: تلزم إذ الإضافة إلى جملة إما اسمية نحو واذكروا إذ أنتم قليل، أو فعلية فعلها ماض لفظا ومعنى، أو فعلية فعلها ماض لفظا ومعنى، نحو وإذ قال ربك للملائكة، وإذ ابتلى إبراهيم ربه. أو معنى لا لفظا، نحو وإذ تقول للذي أنعم الله عليه. وقد اجتمعت الثلاثة في قوله تعالى إلا تنصروه فقد نصره الله إذ أخرجه الذين كفروا ثاني اثنين إذ هما في الغار إذ يقول لصاحبه.
Cool, huh? So he's giving these various situations that it can appear in, like when the mudaf ilayhi is this or that or the other, and then, you know, someone's noticed, hey, in this ayah we've got all three.
وقد تحذف الجملة للعلم بها ويعوض عنها التنوين وتكسر الذال لالتقاء الساكنين، نحو يومئذ يفرح المؤمنون وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون.
So you're very familiar with that, I'm sure, but then you might not have really thought about the origin of it and what's the relationship between that and إذ. So there is explained.
وزعم الأخفش أن إذ في ذلك معربة لزوال افتقارها إلى الجملة، وأن الكسرة إعراب لأن اليوم والحين مضافان إليها، ورد بأن بناءها لوضعها على حرفين، وبأن الافتقار باق في المعنى كالموصول تحذف صلته. حرف إذا يأتي على وجهين، أحدهما أن تكون للمفاجأة فتختص بالجمل الإسمية ولا تحتاج لجواب ولا تقع في الابتداء، ومعناها الحال لا الاستقبال، نحو فألقاها فإذا هي حية تسعى، فلما أنجاهم إذا هم يبغون، وإذا أذقنا الناس رحمة من بعد ضراء مستهم إذا لهم مكر في آياتنا. قال ابن الحاجب: ومعنى المفاجأة حضور الشيء معك في وصف من أوصافك الفعلية، تقول خرجت فإذا الأسد بالباب، فمعناه حضور الأسد معك في زمن وصفك بالخروج أو في مكان خروجك، وحضوره معك في مكان خروجك ألصق بك من حضوره في خروجك، لأن ذلك المكان يخصك دون ذلك الزمان، وكلما كان ألصق كانت المفاجأة فيه أقوى. واختلف في أداة إذا، فقيل إنها حرف وعليه الأخفش ورجحه ابن مالك، وقيل ظرف مكان وعليه المبرد ورجحه ابن عصفور، وقيل ظرف زمان وعليه الزجاج ورجحه الزمخشري، وزعم أن عاملها فعل مقدر مشتق من لفظ المفاجأة. قال: التقدير ثم إذا دعاكم فاجأتم الخروج في ذلك الوقت. ثم قال ابن هشام: ولا يعرف ذلك لغيره، وإنما يعرف ناصبها عندهم الخبر المذكور أو المقدر. قال: ولم يقع الخبر معها في التنزيل إلا مصرحا به. الثاني أن تكون لغير المفاجأة، فالغالب أن تكون ظرفا للمستقبل مضمنة معنى الشرط.
So you might not think that the first thing that would come up when you're talking about إذا is the meaning of مفاجأة. There you go, مفاجأة, right? So there's some description here of one of the types of إذا, and then the other is going to be more like what we have just encountered with إذ, right, where it is actually a kind of shart. So the first one, مفاجأة, meaning you see how it sort of showed up in the translation. That's, as I told you before, not sort of my ideal translation necessarily, but using Yusuf Ali, what does he have? He's got things like lo and behold, and you know, that's one of the ways to do that in translation. It is a bit tricky. I'm just remembering an example of someone who really mistranslated ادفع بالتي هي أحسن فإذا الذي بينك وبينه عداوة كأنه ولي حميم. he translated it like this. This is like, again, like as a native Arabic speaker, and he apparently he says he heard this from a sheikh in tafsir, but I won't blame that sheikh, I'll blame this person, because who knows, maybe the sheikh said something right and then it's misquoted. So he translated, treat people in the best way as though your enemy is an intimate friend. Fussilat verse 34. And then he quoted the ayah in full in Arabic. So obviously this is not the meaning of the ayah, بِحَالٍ مِنَ الْأَحْوَالِ. Treat people in the best way as though your enemy is an intimate friend. So being the person that I am, I replied to him on Facebook. This was a friend. I think we're maybe still Facebook friends, or maybe someone might have cancelled from the other. I said, is there a source? Actually, I called him Ustad at that time. Ustad, is there a source for this translation interpretation? He overlooks the effect of idha, which is the rapid outcome of deflecting evil with what is better, i.e. that enmity is dissolved. He says, Salam, it's my own translation, smiley face, emoticon. You make a good point, emoji, sorry. But I don't think it is talking about enmity being dissolved, because it says, كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ, meaning as if. I think if كَأَنَّهُ wasn't there, then idha would refer to the deflection of evil, Allahu A'lam. I said, please do consult some tafasir. I'm afraid that doesn't seem like a valid reading of the verse. And then he says, I heard it in my sheikh's halaqah. And I said, well, if you find any reference, please share it so I may withdraw my objection. I did consult several tafsirs before commenting. And then I asked him a few years later, and I still got nothing. So, then he did actually answer me after that. He says, it does make perfect sense to me, and I believe I do know a thing or two about the Arabic language. The tafsir of the early scholars have not exhausted the meanings of the Qur'an. If someone comes up with a new understanding that is supported by the Arabic language, does not conflict with an established Islamic principle, it shouldn't be rejected. And I'm not talking about myself. I learned that meaning from my late sheikh, who was a scholar of tafsir himself. This is the problem. This is the world that we are living in, ikhwani wa akhawati. So, there you go. Obviously, that is not supported at all. فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ. Like, behold, lo, as a result of what? إِدْفَعْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Then, as a result of that, in a surprising way, that's the kind of way mufaja'a is translated in ordinary language, it will suddenly be the case that one who was like an enemy to you will be like an intimate friend. So I'm just showing you some real world things, real world disasters of translation, things that I've encountered on my journeys. And generally, the fact that people are not responsive to like evidence. Like, did I attack the guy when I asked him? I said, do you have evidence for that? Any book of tafsir, any book of nahu that might explain what you're saying? He says, no, I think being Lebanese, sorry, I gave away his nationality. I know a thing or two about the Arabic language. Yeah, other useless nationalities are available.
Translation question.
Yeah.
When talking about faja'a means for something to occur, he said ma'aka, and you put for you, right? So if someone were translating normally, I think the first thing that would come would be like with. It wouldn't make sense, I guess, in this place, but with you, like leka would typically be for you, right? So what's kind of your thought process about
حضور الشيء معك, and the way I translated it?
Yeah, like for you.
حضور الشيء معك. ومعنى المفاجأة is Ibn al-Hajjab is saying حضور الشيء معك في وصف من أوصافك الفعلية. Just sort of, I'm looking at the whole description, and it just seemed, if I put with, I would be just following. I can do it. It's not, I know that ma'a means with, but it's just, it means for something to occur in your life, and something to, I think حضور الشيء معك can be like literally, as he said, خرجت فإذا الأسد بالباب, right? The tiger came for tea, right? So it's suddenly, you read The Tiger Came to Tea? No. Some of you will get that reference. So فإذا النمر عند الباب. So maybe I would revise this, because حضور الشيء معك could be also looked at a little bit more literally like that. something to show up in your presence almost. But it's not always going to be فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ كَنَوَالِ الْحَمِيمِ is not literally حضور. So yeah, I'll give it some more thought.
وتختص بالدخول على الجمل الفعلية وتحتاج لجواب وتقع في الابتداء عكس الفجائية. والفعل بعدها إما ظاهر نحو قوله تعالى إذا جاء نصر الله، أو مقدر نحو إذا السماء انشقت، وجوابها إما فعل نحو فإذا جاء أمر الله قضي بالحق، أو جملة اسمية مقرونة بالفاء نحو فإذا نقر في الناقور فذلك يومئذ يوم عسير، فإذا نفخ في الصور فلا أنساب بينهم، أو فعلية طلبية كذلك نحو فسبح بحمد ربك، أو اسمية مقرونة بإذا الفجائية نحو إذا دعاكم دعوة من الأرض إذا أنتم تخرجون، فإذا أصاب به من يشاء من عباده إذا هم يستبشرون. وقد يكون مقدرا لدلالة ما قبله عليه أو لدلالة المقام، وسيأتي في أنواع الحذف. وقد تخرج إذا عن الظرفية. قال الأخفش في قوله تعالى
Sorry, I was not in the right position there in the Arabic for a bit. Interesting example where you've got two types of إذا in the same ayah. Where was the one? It's here anyway. When he calls you by a single call from the earth, that's the first إذا is the conditional one. إذا أنتم تخرجون is إذا of مفاجأة. So Canville is asking, have I written about this particular poem, the examples? I just occasionally tweet about them, and I just have a little rant, and then sometimes I hold my tongue. When people tell you, advise people in private, brother, advise people in private, I'm just telling you that it's often useless as well, unfortunately. When people have got an idea that they know what they're doing, they're not willing to listen. Look, I've got Muhammad here, he's questioning me, he's doing it with the utmost of adab. I might not have, maybe it's my adab is not working, but even when I've done it in the most gentle way, there was a person recently who did a whole thing on Facebook. This is a person who's he's now a lecturer in Quranic Arabic at one of the prestigious universities in the US. And he did a whole post about the difference between waw and fa. And he was saying that fa is for immediate follow-up. Okay, so far so good. But now he's going to tell us about thumma, right? That meme with the right? No, but then he says waw for tarahi, which ma anzalallahu biha min sultan. There's no such thing as waw with tarahi. Waw is for mujar, as we're going to see, muqarana wal atf بدون النظر إلى التعقيب ولا الترتيب ولا شيء. Sometimes they say, could waw have some sense of tartib in it? Oh, there's the dispute over that. But he says, nope. Waw is for coming after, but coming some time later. Then, after saying this disastrous nonsense, he then proceeded to do his own tafsir of the ayah. Which one was it? فاستجاب له ربه فاستجبنا له ونجيناه من الغم, right? In Surah Al-Anbiya, right? فاستجبنا له ونجيناه من الغم. So what was this person's this is a native Arabic speaker, professor, but lecturer in Quranic study, in Quranic Arabic. He says it means that God saved him immediately, but then it was a bit later that he brought Yunus out from the belly of the whale. What is this? What does that mean? What does it mean? Allah answered his prayer. Well, you see, he said to him, Yunus, you will be. I have answered your prayer, but stay in the belly for a few more days. What is this? What is this tafsir aslan? Does any mufassir, does this person have seminary? God knows. His native Arab is enough, right? Iraqi, I think. Iraqi. Just to throw out, I'm going to make enemies of all my all the nations now, right? If I could, I can tell you the Egyptian stories another day. But no, what? What are you talking about? How كيف تجرأت على هذا التفسير? It doesn't make any sense. عقلا ونقلا ولا شيء. No book of tafsir says this. Could you have found someone that no? What nonsense? And then in the comments, even some prominent people, the top comment from very prominent as well, academic and mashallah speaker. So their comment was Allah, and they said Ustad or Sheikh or whatever. We should have a whole weekend retreat to go through these lata'if and reflecting on the Quran. A'udhu billah. When I pointed this thing out to the brother, he and somebody says that he knows him. Yeah, so the reference that I'm making. He replied to me with what was, as if udhrun aqbah min dhanb. He went off on all directions of trying to respond to me. Then he started making multiple posts on his account, which were all harking back to me, talking about how there's so much expansiveness in the meaning of the Quran and people shouldn't limit the meaning of the Quran. And Ibn Arabi's hermeneutics indicates that there's a multiple number. Nothing to do with anything. And then 24 hours later, he replied and said, actually, yeah, I was thinking of thumma. Right? Brothers in Islam, sisters in Islam, please learn your stuff. We are covering this material. You learn, and these are our maraji' that we go back to. If I have a question about waw and fa and thumma, I will go to Imam Al-Suyuti. When I get into an argument with someone about it, the first thing I do, I promise you, the first thing I do is I'll go and read the masadir to make sure it's not me that's having a brain fart, because I have them, right? The difference between me and a lot of people is I don't make whole posts about them. And then I don't dig my heels in for days on end. And this brother, by the way, I think he replied that it was wrong, but then he didn't delete the post. He didn't actually change anything. And honestly speaking, I'm getting emotional about it. I deserved one heck of an apology for the way that he spoke to me. But this is, as I keep telling you, the world that we live in. And that example, by the way, I shared with you, I didn't even make any posts about it because it gets so ugly. I want to talk about the Quran, I want to talk about Nahwa, I want to talk about tafsir. I don't want to get into arguments with people. I just wish that when you pointed it out to them, and I did it as usual in a fairly gentle way, because I don't even know this person, but I've been following them for a day or so. I pointed out in a fairly gentle way. I referenced it. I gave them the quotes from Tafsir al-Alusi, from Tafsir ibn Ashur. I pointed out. And then he just said, oh, actually, Ibn Ashur is saying what I'm saying. Rubbish. Now you've crossed the line. Now we're throwing down. Allahul Musta'an. This is our world that we are in. So I'm just, I'm saying this as a nasiha to beloved brothers and sisters, not to fall into these traps of putting things out there and then digging your heels in when you are clearly in the wrong.
حتى إذا جاءوها أي إن إذا جر بحتى. وقال ابن جني في قوله تعالى إذا وقعت الواقعة في من نصب خافضة رافعة إن إذا الأولى مبتدأ والثانية خبر والمنصوبان حالان وكذا جملة ليس ومعمولاها. والمعنى وقعت الواقعة خافضة لقوم رافعة لآخرين.
So I know we're sort of we're skirting around a few issues. We're not focusing on the text as we should be. Inshallah, we will do that a bit more in the future. But Canval has raised an issue here that finding these things difficult, problematic, understand the whole methodology of tafsir. We need more English books on this. Sure, we need more English books. Inshallah, we'll get there. But ultimately, the problem that kind of lies below all this is that tafsir as a science has kind of lost its champions and lost the sense that there is a field of that's called tafsir, that is a specialist field, that we have to go to the relevant people to ask them. However of a nothing that I am in reality, the fact that I went and studied tafsir specifically in Jamiat al-Azhar, that I did my PhD in that field, I've been working in that field, and I focused on it. I focused narrowly on it to the extent that my fiqh and my hadith and my aqidah, my actual aqidah in my heart is fine. But the point is, these are not fields that I specialize in, and I'm completely comfortable with that. And the fact is that all my colleagues and friends who are out there doing their thing, and mostly muftis and whatnot, by now, when it comes to tafsir, they'll call me up, they'll send me the message, they'll ask for the information, the advice, and I will give that with the utmost of joy that we are completing each other, right? But like many things, people feel that they can speak without having specialized, and that's where the problem happens. And if they can't take maybe someone seeing my name come up on Facebook in their comment section, I'll excuse them that they don't know who they're dealing with anyway, and why should they listen to someone? But if someone also comes to you with some evidence, it doesn't matter who they are. There could be a bird, there could be a hudhud, and you're still supposed to listen to what is being said. If there's no curse words being thrown at you, why won't you just listen to the point that's being made? But part of the reason is that there aren't the kind of red lines around it that probably are around giving fatwa and fiqh, right? We kind of understand that you shouldn't say something is halal and haram unless you're qualified to do so. And if you're not, then suddenly everyone will be on the phone to Mufti so-and-so to give the right hukum on that matter. Whereas in tafsir, it's not so obvious, like who do we go to? We don't have such a sense in our culture at the moment of, who actually knows this field of tafsir, or even that there is such a thing as, as a field of tafsir to specialize in, because people have talked about tafsir in certain ways for so long that people came to think tafsir is just a thing that exists in some books. That's it. Like all you have to do is read those books or don't. Ultimately, tafsir was done by the time of Ibn Abbas. He told us the meaning of everything. Sahaba answered this thing. We have tafsir bil ma'thur. There's no more thinking to be done in tafsir anyway. Why would someone need to specialize in tafsir? Like, why would you need to know how to do tafsir? Like, when tafsir has been done, right? Are you suggesting that people didn't know what the Qur'an is and then you have to interpret it? You are seeing, right? We need to actually know tafsir, how to read tafsir and how to do tafsir, and most importantly, as I'm pointing out to you, how to also evaluate tafsir. If someone comes to you and says, فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ, means treat your enemy like your best friend. Do we say, did Ibn Abbas say that or not? Well, if he didn't say it, right, if he didn't even talk about this ayah, what are you going to do then? You need to go back to the principles of the Arabic language. You need to know إذا الفجائية. You need to know the other things in the sentence. You need to know that whole, idea didn't make sense. So we have to have a path for people. We have to have a path for people to be able to specialize in tafsir, and being humble about it, as my dear students are being in the comments, is the starting point, right? We have to realize there is some, we would actually have to put in years of effort to do this. And that's what unfortunately isn't respected in our general religious landscape, because number one, it's not seen as a field. Number two, it's not seen as a need. Scholars don't go into it. I had conversation with some of my colleagues who were also studying at Al-Azhar, some of them very keen on the Qur'an and tafsir, but they said, I'm going to study Sharia and Qanun anyway. I'm going to study fiqh and usul fiqh anyway in Kulliyat Sharia. And I was like, why? I mean, you're not really into the fiqh like me. You're not that into it. Like, it doesn't make your heart pump, but the Quran does. So why don't you join me over there? So they'd say, well, but first of all, back home, people need fatwa and fiqh, People need that. That's what they're going to ask about. And it's true, they do. They ask me about it as well. And I say, go and ask that guy. but there's lots of people that I can point them to, right? Who studied fiqh and usul and fatwa and madhab and everything, right? But when it comes to tafsir, who's going to ask about that? Oh yeah, like we don't have a crisis of understanding the Quran. We don't have every, Tom, Dick and Harry and Fulan and Fulana out there with their new interpretations, radical, I don't know, pick on different ideologies that people are reading the Quran with these days. They're giving you the new interpretation. And then we're like, it's wrong because I don't like the ideology, but I don't have any way of critiquing that because I don't know actually how the Quran should be interpreted. I just know that that's wrong, right? This feminist thing is very, very bad. But like, are you able to actually analyze what's being said by those people? When people are coming out with their new LGBT-friendly readings of the Quran, yes, it's happening. Yes, it's being published. Yes, there are people who believe this stuff. So where is the answer from our ulama? Oh, it's haram and hiraf. And so where is the actual intelligent response? This needs tafsir, it needs usul al-tafsir. So that was the number one response from my friends. And the other one was, fiqh, you have to study with a teacher. Fiqh, you have to study with a teacher. Whereas tafsir, basically you can read the books and that will do. And by the way, I have a little bit of sympathy with that statement because, I myself, I'd have to be honest with you that a lot of what I am sharing with you and giving to you, I got from the books. That's not it's not a sin, to read things from the books. Not all of these things were actually, it was by talqeen from a teacher, which I'm trying to do with you, but I'm mostly trying to give you the keys by which you can read those books and you will be in a strong position, right? So it's not a bad thing to hit the books, but the idea that tafsir, you just basically kind of need to read a tafsir, then you'll basically understand how it all works. That's not how it works at all. And when we're going into this, I'm not showing you this to bamboozle you, quite the opposite. Yes, on one hand, I'm actually quite happy that people would see, wow, inna lil Qur'ani wujuhan, fayahab al-Iqdam alayh, right? That's a good thing, right? To have this awe and respect for the Qur'an and respect for its language and respect for its interpretation and knowing, to know what's before opening this, right? So that's good. But I want you to actually, by studying this, get to a position where you are rightly confident, to make assessments about things. And in the first place, all of this, by the way, is the language of the books of tafsir. You cannot understand the books of tafsir in reality unless you are familiar with these. You're going to read tafsir ibn Ashur and he's telling you all about, which kind of fa is here. This is fasiha. This is, he's giving you the different possibilities in that fa. If you don't have some background of what those different fa'at are and what each would mean, and for us as speakers of languages other than Arabic, how that would translate, then you don't get the fa'idah in reality from it. You can feel good. I have a feeling that Ibn Ashur's tafsir is one that people feel really good reading, but it's not enough just to feel, wow, this is immense, but you want to actually get the masail that are being discussed and pointed to, right? It's like one of my students at one point, like he lives in a European country, and I remember he said he was teaching some durus on different tafsirs, and he said he was using these 10 or 20 different tafsir sources to prepare his lessons. And I said, like, for example, you've got Ibn Ashur here, tafsir Ibn Ashur. Like, do you understand Ibn Ashur? He said, yeah. I said, well, how do you know? I mean, it's a difficult question. It's an annoying question. I'm sorry. But it's like, how do you know that you're understanding Ibn Ashur when he's speaking to you, when you're reading him, right? There are certain things like what we're learning here is the language of the Quran, yes, but also the language that underpins tafsir. So by getting strong at this, by knowing our nahu well, and especially here, the examples that recur in tafsir and the patterns of the asalib of the Quran, and also some of the different opinions that surround them, This stuff is absolute gold. I cannot even overstate it to you. وأنا تربيت على هذه المواد, right? Not like you. I wasn't sitting in a class with someone who's translated it for me and is teaching me it. No, I just sat and translated it. And when I was translating it, I faced the problem, whoa, how do I even understand this? So then I had to focus on the things that would help me to understand it. Of course, I had studied Nahu before that from various books. And I was already a student, at least at Jamiat al-Azhar. But, you know, I bought everything I could that had relevance to this, everything on Huruf al-Ma'ani. You know, in the other chapters, I bought all the things that pertain to the subjects, anything I could get on Gharib al-Qur'an and Mu'arrab al-Qur'an. Even till now, as I was telling you, working on the Masail of Ibn al-Azraq, I keep buying books. Whenever I see a book that says Masail Ibn al-Azraq, I buy it. And then I see that, okay, was this useful or not? But I try to find some use because I want my translation before it comes out to have been the best that it can possibly be. And this is the Itqan, which we are inspired to by the title. So I'm sorry that a lot of this is ranting and upset kind of sounding. I'm trying to get towards it being inspiring for you. You know, ultimately, I do not see that I have achieved a great deal, got anywhere. I just know that I'm some steps ahead of most people when it comes to this field. But I'm trying to, you know, I could pull the ladder up behind me and say, Khalas, no one will ever have what I have. I studied Al-Itqan fi al-Qur'an, I translated the Adawat, and I could actually keep this translation to myself also. And just throw out quotes from it from time to time whenever I get into arguments. I admit that I've done that a couple of times. I'll be like, you know, oh, well, you know, Imam Suyuti says, and then, you know, like people do, you know, throw quotes at you, but this is fully translated quotes, referenced and everything. I could do all of that, but instead I'm saying, right, how can I pass this on? How can I get other people to get up that ladder and maybe get up quicker? So you might overtake me. If not, then at least you'll get to where I got to quicker than I did. And you can do better things, you know. So what I'm trying to do within the field of tafsir is, you know, fill in some gaps. You know, there are so many gaps and so many needs that people don't even know are needs. So the biggest urgent thing is to identify that there are needs. People don't know what they need and how much they need it. But once you start to provide it, I think people, inshallah, once they get really actually good tafsir in their hands, they will suddenly realize what they were missing all these years. Right, with, you know, a bit of translation of this here and there, and even the Quran translations that they read, like are hardly giving them any khidmah, are hardly opening their understanding. I want to change the game, and the more that we make some inroads in this and some steps in the right direction, the more that, you know, the field will open up for more people to do more and more and more, you know, really uplift the whole service to the Quran that we can offer for the next generation. All right, we're totally lost from from the Adawat now. I'm sorry, I'm really, really sorry. But a little bit of passion does not go astray.
هو وقت رج الأرض، والجمهور أنكروا خروجها عن الظرفية، وقالوا في الآية الأولى حتى حرف ابتداء داخل على الجملة بأسرها ولا عمل له، وفي الثانية إذا الثانية بدل من الأولى، والأولى ظرف وجوابها محذوف لفهم المعنى، وحسنه طول الكلام، وتقديره بعد إذا الثانية أي انقسمتم أقساما وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة، وقد تخرج عن الاستقبال فترد للحال.
So let's see. The examples that are given for maybe إذا not being a ظرف are حتى إذا جاءوها, because they say coming after حتى, it cannot be a ظرف. And then خافضة رافعة in this reading, which is non-canonical, not in the mutawatir. It is said that in this case, the first إذا sorry, حتى إذا جاءوها. Sorry, the first إذا وقعت الواقعة is مبتدا, and the second is its predicate. Hence both are nominative. Thus the two accusative are substantial along with laysa and its subject and predicate. And the meaning is the time وقت الواقعة, which raises some people and debases others, is the time of the earth shaking. وقت وقوع الواقعة خافضة لقوم رافعة لآخرين هو وقت رج الأرض. That's one heck of a تقدير. Yeah, but awesome. That's deep work. You know, that's pretty cool. So then, in the response, the Jumhur say no, this is not the case. قالوا في الآية إن حتى حرف ابتداء داخل الجملة بأسرها. So this is حتى إذا جاءوها. The sentence is إذا جاءوها, and then حتى is a حرف ابتداء which doesn't have an amal on إذا, right? وفي الثانية إن إذا الثانية بدل من الأولى والأولى ظرف. Okay.
So the thaniya is supposed to be إذا رجت الأرض رجا, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah, so it's a badal from the first. The first is a ظرف, so the jawab of إذا is محذوف. حسن طول الكلام تقديره بعد إذا الثانية أي إذا رجت الأرض. You know, so you do the تقدير after the second one. So the second إذا is a badal for the first one to kind of boost. This is the term that I use. This is like I say حسنه طول الكلام. The fact that the badal is there is because of طول الكلام. إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس. Then this is a few things mentioned. إذا was it بست الجبال before that. إذا رجت الأرض رجا. Right, so then the تقدير of that is مقدر after إن قسمتم أقساما وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة.
Okay, so you're saying what comes after is actually the taqdeer here.
No, this part إن قسمتم أقساما is the تقدير. وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة is مصرح به, right?
Yeah, so that's what confusing. So
because there's the wa.
Okay.
So the wa means the وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة cannot be itself the jawab. So there has to be a تقدير because of the wa. إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبست الجبال بسا فكانت هباء منبثا إن قسمتم أقساما وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة. So there could be other solutions. There could be other solutions, but what we see here usually is like one or more of the things said about the ayah in order to kind of gather it thematically under discussion about إذا and some of the kind of outliers. So most of the إذا is so straightforward and fits into our pattern. And then there are a few cases where, could this إذا be something a bit different? Some said so. But then the Jumhur say, no, it's على بابها, it is ظرف.
نحو والليل إذا يغشى فإن الغشيان مقارن لليل والنهار إذا تجلى والنجم إذا هوى. وللماضي نحو وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا الآية فإن الآية نزلت بعد الرؤية والانفضاض. وكذا قوله تعالى ولا على الذين إذا ما أتوك لتحملهم قلت لا أجد ما أحملكم عليه. وقوله حتى إذا بلغ مطلع الشمس وقوله حتى إذا ساوى بين الصدفين.
So this is examples of departing from the future meaning, because mostly it is when something happens in the future. It may refer to the present, such as وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَى, see, as it covers. وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا تَجَلَّى, appears. وَالنَّجْمِ إِذَا هَوَى. But it may also be for the past, which is kind of, it's you know, you're using the maldi. وَإِذَا رَأَوْا تِجَارَةً, when they saw some bargain, because this ayah was revealed after that happened. However, I don't know if that's really a clincher for the point, but let's see the other examples. ولا على الذين إذا ما أتوك حتى إذا بلغ. Okay, here I think clearly from the past. The other ones have something in between, right? Because it's still referring to some ongoing issue, or like they are being told, are you, essentially by implication, are you the kind of people who would abandon your prophet? Right? It's not just saying when they saw this happened. I don't think it's a, مجرد or محض مضي. حتى إذا بلغ مطلع الشمس حتى إذا ساوى بين الصدفين. Clearly intending the past tense. It doesn't mention here the example. There's some discussion about وإذا قرأت القرآن وإذا قرأت القرآن فاستعذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. There was a point of view, there was an opinion that you do the isti'adha after reciting the Quran. وإذا قرأت القرآن فاستعذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. So some of the fuqaha said that after reciting, then you say أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, which obviously is not the common view, but that is based on the fi'l madi. إذا قرأت فاستعذ. So when you have read it, but even then it's sort of referring to instances in the future of your reading, then upon completion, إذا قرأت, when you have completed that reading. The other point of view, of course, is when you read.
For these examples, like وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَى, وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا تَجَلَّى, is it possible at all to understand it as a future thing as well, since it's kind of like a recurring event? So when, or وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَى?
Perhaps. I mean, it's also notable that Yaghsha has Mudari and Tajalla has Madi, so there's going to be some specifics that you need to think about here. وَالنَّجْمِ إِذَا هَوَى. Yeah, but what these give us are sort of the questions around the ayah which are pertinent and which we can look into more if we're really interested in the grammar of a particular ayah. We can follow that up and look at the tafsir of a specific ayah.
وقد تخرج عن الشرطية نحو وإذا ما غضبوا هم يغفرون والذين إذا أصابهم البغي هم ينتصرون. فإذا في الآيتين ظرف لخبر المبتدأ بعدها، ولو كانت شرطية والجملة الإسمية جوابا لاقترنت بالفاء. وقول بعضهم إنه على تقديرها مردود بأنها لا تحذف إلا لضرورة. وقول آخر إن الضمير توكيد لا مبتدأ وأن ما بعده الجواب تعسف. وقول آخر جوابها محذوف مدلول عليه بالجملة بعدها تكلف من غير ضرورة. تنبيهات. الأول: المحققون على أن ناصب إذا شرطها، والأكثرون أنه ما في جوابها من فعل أو شبهه. الثاني: قد تستعمل إذا للاستمرار في الأحوال الماضية والحاضرة والمستقبلة، كما يستعمل الفعل المضارع لذلك. ومنه وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا آمنا وإذا خلوا إلى شياطينهم قالوا إنا معكم إنما نحن مستهزئون، أي هذا شأنهم أبدا. وكذا قوله تعالى وإذا قاموا إلى الصلاة قاموا كسالى. الثالث: ذكر ابن هشام في المغني إذ ما ولم يذكر إذا ما، وقد ذكرها الشيخ بهاء الدين السبكي في عروس الأفراح في أدوات الشرط. فأما إذ ما فلم تقع في القرآن، ومذهب سيبويه أنها حرف. وقال المبرد وغيره إنها باقية على الظرفية. وأما إذا ما فوقعت في القرآن في قوله تعالى وإذا ما غضبوا إذا ما أتوك لتحملهم. ولم أر من تعرض لكونها باقية على الظرفية أو محولة إلى الحرفية، ويحتمل أن يجري فيها القولان في إذ ما، ويحتمل أن يجزم ببقائها على الظرفية لأنها أبعد عن التركيب بخلاف إذ ما. التنبيه الرابع: تختص إذا بدخولها على المتيقن والمظنون والكثير الوقوع بخلاف إذ، فإنها
So this is a nice tanbih here as to when do we see the word إذا used, when do we see in used. So in is generally for something which is less likely, less frequent. So when you observe that in the Quran, you can really improve your understanding, because I think in sort of contemporary spoken Arabic, إذا is used interchangeably and to the extent that in is pretty much disappeared from a kind of modern use.
تعمل في المشكوك بخلاف إن، فإنها تستعمل في المشكوك والموهوم النادر. ولهذا قال الله تعالى: إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا
The expectation is that you will stand for
ثم
salah.
قال: وإن كنتم جنبا فاطهروا. فأتى بإذا في الوضوء لتكرره وكثرة أسبابه، وأتى بإن في الجنابة لندرة وقوعها بالنسبة إلى الحدث. وقال
Yeah, so most of the time you'll not be junub when you have to do your wudu, right? Most of the time the thing that will happen most, فَغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ, this is الحدث الأصغر. وَإِن كُنْتُمْ جُنُبًا فَاتَّهَّرُوا, and on those occasions which are less, that you are in a state of janaba, then you must perform the full rigorous purification.
الله تعالى: فإذا جاءتهم الحسنة قالوا لنا هذه وإن تصبهم سيئة يطيروا. وقال: وإذا أذقنا الناس رحمة فرحوا بها وإن تصبهم سيئة بما قدمت أيديهم إذا هم يقنطون. أتى في جانب الحسنة بإذا لأن نعم الله على العباد كثيرة ومقطوع بها، وأتى بإن في جانب السيئة لأنها نادرة الوقوع ومشكوك فيها. نعم، أشكل على هذه القاعدة آيتان.
So this is the general pattern that you need to keep in mind. When someone says the fa'idah of this ayah is look at the consciousness of idha and in, and there's a rule here. So that's fine, but sometimes people do that without istiqra. Right? This is the kind of core problem that people have, is they reach a conclusion without considering all the ayahs that would have a bearing on it, right? So you might find that the rule works, al-ghalib, and there might be some exceptions to it. Or you might say, well, there are things that seem to go against my rule, but actually I have an explanation for those ones, right? But the important thing is to actually take account of it in the first place, right? If you just don't bother, right? And some people say, oh, there's no such and such in the Quran. There was a famous one in England. He says, jilbab is not even mentioned in the Quran. I mean, like, it really is. Not just one jilbab, but jalabib,
قوله تعالى: ولئن متم، وقوله أفإن مات، فأتى بإن مع أن الموت محقق الوقوع. والأخرى قوله تعالى: وإذا مس الناس ضر دعوا ربهم منيبين إليه ثم إذا أذاقهم منه رحمة، فأتى بإذا في الطرفين. وأجاب الزمخشري.
So two kinds of objections. One, your point about it being for something that is not certain. Well, why is in used with maut, which is absolutely certain, right? Hatta ataka al-yaqeen, right? The maut is called yaqeen because it is the most certain thing that any of us will face in life. And then the point about this ayah, إِذَا أَذَقْنَا وَإِن تُصِبْهُمْ. If you were just to read that, go, Allah, like the person in the comment, Allah, right? That's fine, but just wait 1 minute before we do that. Let's just compare and see if this is muttarid or if there is some variation in that. And by the way, in the example I mentioned about فَاسْتَجَبْنَا وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ, there is also example with the fa used twice, and then why is that? That's an actually good question, like to compare it with the ones with the fa. فَنَجَّيْنَاهُ. Comparing the waw and the fa is actually fruitful and interesting, but just not in the way that was being done in that post. So Zamakhshari wants to defend the point and the rule. So let's see, how is it defended?
عن الأولى بأن الموت لما كان مجهول الوقت أجري.
So I said here there are two types of verses which could come to this rule. That was looking at the fact that each one represents a type of response. But you could say two verses. But then in the first place, وَلْإِن مُتُّمْ أَفَإِن مَاتَ is already two verses, right? So it's not just two verses.
It's funny because I actually had written that down. It was like two examples or more, and then I saw this third example he gives. I was
right.
Like, this makes more sense the way you translated it.
Because he says here, وَالْأُخْرَى. So the first ayah is actually two ayahs, right?
مجرى غير المجزوم. وأجاب السكاكي عن الثانية بأنه قصد التوبيخ والتقريع، فأتى بإذا ليكون تخويفا لهم وإخبارا بأنهم لا بد أن يمسهم شيء من العذاب. واستفيد التقليل من لفظ المس وتنكير ضر.
Right, so the first answer is, well, yes, you will definitely die, but like, will you die today? Will you die tomorrow? There is uncertainty about the wuqu' of it, right? So that's a nice point. Regarding the second, I'm not going to comment what does muttarid mean. Did I say muttarid or?
Yeah, you said muttarid. You have to make sure that
I said it like in this last couple of minutes. Okay, muttarid means consistently occurring, right? Does this rule apply across the board? That's muttarid, right? So here, as-Sakaki is saying, okay, so here, the idha and the idha has a certain effect, which is to indicate that you're going to face this and you're going to face that. Whereas here, the effect is something else. So then you'd have a follow-up question to this, because otherwise that becomes an ad hoc thing. Like, here it's absolutely beautiful and perfect because there's the contrast between idha and in. Here it's absolutely beautiful and perfect because there's idha and idha. So that's fine. But what you need to do is the next step. Why is each appropriate? Most likely to its immediate context. What is it about that surah, about that discussion, about that context that makes the ayah in Ulum, this way that the ayah was expressed was so beautiful and perfect? Oh, and this one also is in Surah Al-Rum. Okay, they're both in Surah Al-Rum, so it's not about which surah it's in, but the position of the points. And this is where we have a whole genre of works which is called mutashabihat, or al-mutashabih al-lafzi, or mutashabih al-ayat al-mushtabihat sometimes. What's meant is resembling verses, where there are two ayahs which somehow are not necessarily just the same words, but just they're talking about the same thing, but there's a variation in the way that they express it. Here with a fi'l, here with an ism, here with idha, here with in. So the main work in that field is Milak al-Ta'wil by Ibn Zubayr al-Gharnati, who is the Sheikh of Ibn Juzay, our friendly Mufassir. So his Sheikh Ibn Zubayr, who we see him quote sometimes in his work, he has a book called Milak al-Ta'wil. Milak al-Ta'wil. Does word order fall into category? Yes. Where there's taqdeem and ta'khir and so on. Where something is ifrad and jama' and so on. Like the ayat about the killing of children, Surah Al-An'am, Surah Al-Isra. Yes, for example, these. So in this genre of works, they are compared, and then it's not just a case of, oh, well, both are fine. That's okay. But we want to go past that and say each one came in its right place, came in the right way, in the right context, for the right purpose. And that's where this form of analysis applies, right? So Sakaki's point of view here, or what he explains, is along these lines. What does he say? Since the purpose is rebuke and chastise, that was used to inspire fear by implying that some torment must indeed touch them. And then it is still rare because massa is still, there is some istib'ad of it. And durrun, being again indefinite, also it contains this sense of like it is less certain, and if there should touch them some harm, right? Yes, the book Milak al-Ta'wil is in print. Typically it comes in 2 volumes. It's quite a challenging read. There are others that are a little bit easier to digest, but they're all kind of, they draw from Milak al-Ta'wil. He himself took from a book called Tanasub al-Durar. No, it's not Nazm al-Durar. That's why I'm trying to avoid saying Nazm al-Durar. The book of Al-Iskafi. Al-Iskafi is the, Tanasub al-Durar, something like that. So he has he took from that book and expanded on it, and then other books have kind of followed in the path of, just write Iskafi and see what comes up. Not Nescafe, Iskafi. Right. So we're going to need to the recommendations for easy reading the same topic. Inshallah, there's going to be some videos coming out later with myself and Ustad Norman discussing books, because we went through my entire library and I could have talked about all these different genres. So there will be some examples, but like I don't know if I've got them. You see, I think I do actually behind me, but I'll show you some things inshallah on the group. But anything that's about mutashabih al-ayat, some of the Samara'is have written things on this. So the son of Fadl Salih Samara'i, I think it's Muhammad Fadl Salih Samara'i, has got a book which is like a study of Milak al-Ta'wil. That's a bit of an easier kind of introduction. Yeah, what's it called? Durrat al-Tanzil wa Ghurrat al-Ta'wil, that's what it's called, yeah. So that's Iskafi's book. So this kind of thing depends upon, looking at the occurrences of things and thinking sensitively about the context in which each wording occurs. And that is a very fruitful place of tadabbur. Of course, if your starting point is just, I need to prove that this is the best and that this is mu'jiz, you might not get to the result. I mean, this might sound strange what I'm saying here. There is a kind of tension between what I would say the tafsir approach and the i'jaz approach. I may get into trouble for saying this. Ibn Ashur will not be happy with me. I named my center after him, but there is a tension for me between these two things, because the i'jaz approach is kind of based on what you could call an apologetic mindset, and that is to say, trying to allay the concern and the fear of your listener or your opponent about there being a mistake here or a weakness here. Whereas the tafsir approach is fundamentally about, how do I understand this? What can I understand from it? Right? So it's much more about listening. Tafsir is much more about listening and being open to possibilities. When you are in a kind of jadali mindset where you have to prove something, then you have to kind of proceed on a basis of certainty. It doesn't come across right when you're in a debate and you say, well, how do we know that perhaps here Allah meant such and such? Or maybe it was like this. They'll be like, oh, maybe and maybe, is it? Well, I've just said that there's a contradiction between this ayah and that ayah, right? So the two approaches, the tafsir based and the i'jaz based, yes, they can coexist. Of course, they can feed each other, especially tafsir can feed into the i'jaz side. But sometimes you've got to be, this is what I'm asking for, there needs to be a bit of tafsir space that's not apologetic and not, you're not dealing directly with the critics or the people or the doubters who are struggling with their faith. You just need to be able to ask the questions honestly, humbly, be open to a state of hayra for a while until Allah guides you to the best understanding, because it's not all about trying to impress the person that you're that you're talking to. Question: would you say this is crucial to study and part of tafsir? It's part of tafsir, or the resembling verses, similar verses. I would say so, yeah. I mean, it falls somewhere on the scale of things that are crucial in tafsir. Because when you come to an ayah, you could just say, and we did the tafsir of this and the other surah, so, I don't have to say anything more about it. Or you understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it again here. Why? What do I get from it here? Right? Imagine in Surah Ar-Rahman, if every time you see فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمْ سَبَقَ تَفْسِيرُهُ. You can just leave it. Maybe that's, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if in a way a lot of tafsir are actually like that. I need to go and look really to see how they handle this. But each time it comes up, it's like, well, what more have we got to say about فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمْ تُكَذِّبُونَ? We covered the words. But each time it might give a different feeling, right? And part of the Qur'an, by the way, is outside of tafsir. It is the feeling that it imparts. فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. I brought this example up previously. Like, is there anything wrong with just saying the second one, of course, means the same as the first, but what does it make you feel? Reassurance, right? Is that a tafsir point I'm making? Yeah, sort of. But like, I'm not really explaining the second ayah. I'm explaining why it's there after the statement was already made. But this is like sort of a generality rather than specific to that ayah. Let's see what point we can just stop at. Right, we'll just finish إِذَا and then wrap up for today.
وأما قوله تعالى وإذا أنعمنا على الإنسان أعرض ونأى بجانبه وإذا مسه الشر فذو دعاء عريض، فأجيب عنه بأن الضمير في مسه للمعرض المتكبر لا لمطلق الإنسان، ويكون لفظ إذا للتنبيه على أن مثل هذا المعرض يكون ابتلاؤه بالشر مقطوعا به.
So here, like, this is another one that can be in the list of objections, but it wasn't mentioned up here. That's why I put in the footnote. Another is 4151. So here the answer comes. So sometimes that happens when someone is taking a book and sort of summarizing from somewhere. Like maybe it got missed from the list of objections, but it's in the list of answers, so we understand that it's one of the objections as well.
وقال الخوبي الذي أظنه أنه يجوز دخولها على المتيقن والمشكوك لأنها ظرف وشرط، فبالنظر إلى الشرط تدخل على المشكوك، وبالنظر إلى الظرف تدخل على المتيقن كسائر الظروف.
So you see here that when you take into account all these ayat, it maybe invites you to reassess the rule or adjust the rule rather than just explaining away the ones that don't fit your rule. This is a general point which, inshallah, we'll see many examples of it. We won't always comment on it. But this is what's involved in the scholarly process, right? It's not just that because some earlier scholars said that this is for that, we must constantly spend our whole, the rest of until Yawm al-Qiyamah trying to explain that and make it work. If it doesn't work, you can adjust it. You can present a different rule.
التنبيه الخامس: خالفت إذا حرف إن في إفادة العموم. قال ابن عصفور: فإذا قلت إذا قام زيد قام عمرو أفادت أنه كلما قام زيد قام عمرو. قال: هذا هو الصحيح، وفي أن المشروط بها إذا كان عدما يقع الجزاء في الحال، وفي إن لا يقع حتى يتحقق اليأس من وجوده، وفي أن جزاءها مستعقب لشرطها على الاتصال لا يتقدم ولا يتأخر بخلاف إن، وفي أن مدخولها لا تجزمه لأنها لا تتمخض شرطا. خاتمة: قيل قد تأتي إذا زائدة، وخرج عليه إذا السماء انشقت، أي انشقت السماء، كما قال تعالى اقتربت الساعة.
Question.
He says وفي أن جزاءها مستعقب لشرطها على الاتصال لا يتقدم ولا يتأخر. So does that mean, basically what I understood is that it comes immediately and connected to the like the shart happening. So as soon as it happens, the consequence kind of happens.
Yes. I mean, that sounds right, but let me read and check, right? وفي أن جزاءها مستعقب لشرطها على الاتصال. Yes, لا يتقدم ولا يتأخر بخلاف إن. Yeah, that's what I think he's saying.
Okay, so that's what you mean.
فقد يكون عقبه وقد يتأخر عنه. So إن تجتهد تنجح. I mean, it's not the best example, but like if you work hard, you will succeed, but eventually maybe. But إذا اجتهدت نجحت.
So that's what you mean by follows the condition within its time frame. I just found it a bit...
The wording is a bit funny, huh? Is that follows the condition? What did I say? Within its time frame regarding what phrase? لشرط على الاتصال. Yeah, it's probably a funny phrase to translate it with. Like you get what I'm saying, but you know, it's not clear, is it? Immediately. But I think that maybe what led me that way was neither preceding it nor coming later. Follows the condition within its time frame, neither preceding it nor coming later. Yeah, within its time frame, I mean straight away.
Okay, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll stop here for today, inshallah. We'll try to have a bit more of a sort of fast run through. I'll try and spare my rants. No promises. But if we need more sessions to get through chapter 40, it's okay. Inshallah, it's just that I'm trying to make it somewhat digestible, because in reality, if we are to teach this properly, it's like, I don't know, 1 month course just on chapter 40. So I part of what I'm doing now is sort of Hassan to say we don't mind the rants. Barakallah feekum. So you know, I'm trying to get a sense of how this looks when you teach it. So you're my guinea pigs. Don't take offense. I don't mean that kind of PIG. Yeah, guinea pigs are cute things. All right. So this way we can see how is the kind of sense of reading through it. What do we face? What is clear? What's not clear? And inshallah, we can then create a longer course later on. So until tomorrow, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.